Hello everyone, welcome to Behind the Battle channel. Don't forget subscribe, like and share to get more videos please. At the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, the world's major powers were mostly concentrated in Europe. Outside of Europe, the other powers were considered secondary. The United States had just begun to emerge as a new power, but its strength was primarily economic and industrial. Militarily, it was not yet a global force. At that time, the US followed an isolationist policy, avoiding involvement in foreign affairs. Protected by two vast oceans, the Atlantic to the east and the Pacific to the west, America felt secure and thus remained largely uninvolved in international matters, especially those beyond the American continent. In Asia, Japan was also rising as a new power. However, unlike the United States, Japan abandoned its isolationist policy and embraced expansionism, much like the major European powers. Even so, Japan at that time remained a regional power and had not yet built the military strength necessary to become a true global superpower like the European nations. In Europe, five great powers dominated the scene and competed fiercely, ultimately leading to the outbreak of World War I. These powers were Britain, France, Germany, Russia, and Austria-Hungary. Among them, Britain was the most powerful. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Britain was the world's leading power, similar to the role played by the United States at the end of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century. However, by the late 19th century, a new rival emerged to challenge Britain's dominance, Germany. Before 1870, Germany was not a unified nation. Instead, it was a collection of small, separate states. Among them, the Kingdom of Prussia was the largest and had the strongest military. Otto von Bismarck, who became Prime Minister of Prussia in 1862, was a staunch conservative who dreamed of uniting the German states. Bismarck developed a strategy, provoke a war with France, Germany's historical enemy since the time of Napoleon I. He believed that a common enemy would ignite nationalist sentiment and unify the German states. To achieve this, Bismarck manipulated events to make it appear that France was the aggressor against Germany. In July 1870, Emperor Napoleon III of France declared war on Prussia. Bismarck quickly rallied all the German states into a powerful coalition to fight against France, presenting it as a defense against foreign invasion. In 1871, after defeating France, the German states were successfully unified under Prussian leadership, marking the birth of a powerful, united Germany. Germany unified and formed a new empire under the leadership of Kaiser Wilhelm I, with Otto von Bismarck serving as Chancellor, the head of the government. At that time, the German Empire became one of the world's great powers, both economically and industrially. However, Germany wanted even more. To stand equally alongside the other major powers, it needed something it lacked: colonies. Driven by ambition, Germany sought to become a colonial empire. Leaders believed that expanding colonial territories would not only open new markets and secure more natural resources but also strengthen Germany's position among the world's superpowers. Germany began pursuing an aggressive colonial policy, focusing particularly on Africa and the Asia-Pacific region. This expansion led to conflicts with the older colonial powers, especially France and Britain. The competition among European powers grew fiercer by the day. Each nation rushed to strengthen its military forces, sparking an intense arms race, especially at sea, between Britain and Germany. Along with this military build-up, the powers began forming tied alliances. In 1879, Germany and Austria-Hungary formed a dual alliance. 3 years later, in 1882, Italy joined, turning it into the Triple Alliance. In response to the growing German threat, France sought its own allies. In 1892, France and Russia formed an alliance, followed by a 1904 agreement between France and Britain. Finally, in 1907, Britain and Russia reached an agreement, leading to the creation of the Triple Entente, made up of France, Britain, and Russia. Thus, by the early 20th century, Europe was divided into two major blocs: Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy on one side, France, Britain, and Russia on the other. These alliances would be the key players in the First World War, which erupted from 1914 to 1918. Today, more than 100 years later, the causes of World War I are still debated among historians. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary in June 1914 is often seen as the spark that ignited the conflict. However, the deeper roots of the war stretched back decades, growing from intense rivalry among Europe's great powers and the rise of nationalism across the continent. The first embers of the First World War were lit as early as 1871, with the Franco-Prussian War. Germany, victorious in that war, unified its states and formed a powerful empire, aiming to compete with Europe's established powers. France, defeated and humiliated, was forced to cede the territory of Alsace-Lorraine to Germany. This loss fueled deep resentment and a desire for revenge among the French people. The mistrust, rivalries, and fierce competition over colonial territories drove European nations to strengthen their armies and forge tightly knit alliances, always preparing for the possibility that one day war would break out. France formed a triple entente with Britain and Russia. Meanwhile, Germany built its own alliance with Austria-Hungary and Italy. At the same time, tensions in the Balkans were rapidly rising after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. Former Ottoman territories began declaring independence one after another, and neighboring countries competed fiercely to control these newly independent lands. In 1908, Austria-Hungary formally annexed Bosnia, a former province of the Ottoman Empire. This action angered Serbia, whose population shared close ethnic and linguistic ties with Bosnia and saw Bosnia as part of its rightful territory. Russia, Serbia's ally, also strongly protested the annexation. The Bosnian crisis deepened the rivalry between Austria-Hungary and Russia and pushed tensions in Europe to dangerous new heights. The situation worsened when the Balkan Wars broke out in 1912 and 1913. In 1912, four Balkan states, Serbia, Greece, Montenegro, and Bulgaria, formed a military alliance known as the Balkan League to fight against the weakening Ottoman Empire. Within a few months, the Balkan League achieved victory and seized significant territories. However, soon after, a second Balkan War erupted, this time between the former allies themselves. Bulgaria fought against Serbia and Greece over the division of the conquered lands. By the end of the wars in August 1913, Serbia emerged as the dominant military power in the Balkans and the regional balance of power shifted towards Russia. This deeply alarmed Austria-Hungary, which now viewed Serbia as a growing threat. On the morning of June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, arrived by train in Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia, an area that Austria-Hungary had annexed in 1908 under Serbian protest. A group of 7 Serbian nationalists, supported by a terrorist organization, plotted to assassinate the Archduke. They positioned themselves along the route where the Archduke's motorcade would pass. Despite warnings about the risks, Franz Ferdinand insisted on traveling in an open car to appear more friendly and approachable to the local population. Around 10 a.m., one of the assassins threw a grenade at the Archduke's car, but the bomb missed, hitting the car behind instead. In the chaos, the Archduke's driver sped off towards the Sarajevo City Hall. The would-be assassin attempted to commit suicide but was quickly arrested by police. After attending a formal reception at City Hall, Franz Ferdinand decided to cancel his remaining schedule to visit the hospital where the victims of the morning's attack were being treated. On the way to the hospital, however, the Archduke's car took a wrong turn, where another assassin, Gavrilo Princip, happened to be waiting. Seizing the opportunity, Princip stepped forward and fired 2 fatal shots, killing both Franz Ferdinand and his wife, Sophie. The Austro-Hungarian Empire placed full blame for the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand on Serbia, and on July 28, 1914, it declared war on the country. Due to the complex web of alliances that had formed over previous decades, the conflict between Austria-Hungary and Serbia quickly spread to involve the other major powers, including Germany, Italy, Britain, France, and Russia. The roots of World War I, which broke out in 1914, ran deep, originating from numerous tensions that had been building for decades. These included the Franco-Prussian War of 1870 to 1871, the rise of a powerful and ambitious German empire eager to expand its colonial reach, the surge of nationalist movements across Europe, and an intense naval arms race, particularly between Germany and Britain. Furthermore, a tangled network of military alliances created a situation where any regional conflict had the potential to escalate into a full-scale world war. Nevertheless, the immediate spark that ignited the war was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, in Sarajevo on June 28, 1914. The assassination was carried out by Serbian nationalists, members of a movement seeking independence for Slavic peoples. Austria-Hungary, along with several other nations, saw Serbia as responsible for the attack. Austria-Hungary, already viewing Serbia as a growing threat, seized the opportunity to crush Serbian nationalism once and for all. However, because Serbia had the powerful Russian Empire as an ally, Austria-Hungary hesitated to act immediately. Instead, it sought assurances from Germany, known as the blank check, confirming German support in case Russia intervened militarily. After receiving Germany's guarantee, Austria-Hungary sent Serbia an ultimatum on July 23, 1914. The ultimatum included 10 harsh demands, many of which were virtually impossible to fulfill within the strict 48-hour deadline. Some conditions directly infringed on Serbia's sovereignty. In truth, Austria-Hungary had already decided to go to war. The ultimatum was a mere formality. On July 25, Serbia responded, agreeing to most of the demands, but refusing a few points that it considered a violation of its independence. Nonetheless, Austria-Hungary rejected Serbia's reply and declared war on July 28, 1914. Because of the intricate alliance system, the conflict quickly spiraled outward. After Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, Russia began mobilizing its army to defend its Slavic ally. In response, Germany mobilized its forces and issued an ultimatum to Russia, demanding that it cease military preparations within 12 hours. Receiving no satisfactory reply, Germany declared war on Russia on August 1, 1914. Germany then demanded that France remain neutral in the conflict. When France refused, stating it would act in its own national interests, Germany declared war on France as well. On August 3, Germany declared war on France. 3 days later, Britain, an ally of France, declared war on Germany in response. Japan, bound by its alliance with Britain, also joined the war, declaring war on Germany and Austria-Hungary on August 23. By late August, Germany launched the First World War on two simultaneous fronts, attacking France in the west and preparing to counter Russian forces in the east. On August 4, German troops invaded Belgium in order to reach northern France more quickly. Meanwhile, French forces launched an offensive against Germany's eastern border, aiming to reclaim Alsace-Lorraine, a territory France had lost to Germany in the War of 1870–1871. However, the French attack failed, and they were pushed back by German forces. In the west, German troops successfully pushed through Belgium and advanced into northern France, coming within just 70 kilometers of Paris. But there, French forces, supported by the British Expeditionary Force, managed to halt the German advance. This marked the beginning of trench warfare, a brutal and static form of combat where both sides dug deep trenches facing each other, launching attacks across a devastated no-man's land. The trench warfare dragged on for nearly 3 years, dominating most of World War I and causing unimaginable destruction and loss of life. On every battlefield, casualties were staggering, with millions of soldiers killed or wounded on both the French and German sides. When World War I broke out in 1914, Germany faced the daunting challenge of fighting on two fronts, France and Britain in the west, and the powerful Russian Empire in the east. In early August 1914, Germany launched a massive assault through Belgium towards France. At the same time, it was forced to divert a large portion of its forces eastward to resist Russia's advance. By late August, with the help of Austro-Hungarian troops, Germany managed to halt the Russian offensive. However, splitting their forces weakened Germany's position in the west, allowing French and British troops to regroup and block the German advance. In the 3 years following the outbreak of World War I, neither side was able to claim a decisive victory. On the Western Front, German and French forces fought each other in brutal trench warfare, with the battle lines barely shifting. Meanwhile, on the Eastern Front, German and Russian armies clashed repeatedly, yet neither side succeeded in defeating the other. By late 1917, however, a major turning point occurred in the East. The Russian people, mostly workers and poor farmers, had grown increasingly weary and disillusioned with the war. Revolutionary movements opposing the Russian monarchy gained momentum, ultimately culminating in the Russian Revolution. In October 1917, Tsar Nicholas II was overthrown, and the Bolsheviks, led by Lenin, seized power and established a communist government. Upon taking control, Lenin immediately sought to withdraw Russia from the war. Peace negotiations with Germany and its allies began in December 1917. Russia's withdrawal greatly relieved Germany, as it allowed German forces to be redeployed to the Western Front to strengthen their fight against France. Despite losing Russia as an ally, Britain and France soon gained a powerful new partner, the United States, which formally entered the war in 1917. At the start of the conflict in 1914, the United States had maintained a policy of neutrality, believing that the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans provided natural protection from European conflicts. President Woodrow Wilson insisted on keeping America out of the war, and most Americans, committed to peace, supported this stance. However, Germany's actions gradually pushed the United States toward intervention. Seeking to blockade Britain and starve it into submission, Germany launched unrestricted submarine warfare, targeting all ships, including civilian vessels entering or leaving British ports. In May 1915, a German U-boat sank the RMS Lusitania, a British passenger liner, killing more than 1,000 people, including over 100 Americans. This tragedy inflamed American public opinion and strained diplomatic relations between the United States and Germany. Nevertheless, the U.S. government chose not to enter the war immediately, instead pursuing diplomatic protests. As the war dragged on into 1917 and Germany announced the resumption of unrestricted submarine attacks, threatening all ships, including American ones, tensions escalated. In January 1917, Germany also tried to persuade Mexico to join the war against the United States, a plot revealed in the infamous Zimmermann telegram. Following these provocations, the U.S. broke off diplomatic relations with Germany. Finally, after German U-boats sank 4 American merchant ships, President Wilson asked Congress for a declaration of war. In April 1917, the United States officially entered World War I on the side of the Allies. By November of that year, American troops began arriving in France. Although the U.S. military was still small, relatively inexperienced, and poorly equipped compared to European armies, America's entry into the war was a major turning point. Despite its initial limitations, the United States had the capacity to quickly mobilize millions of troops. Meanwhile, after nearly 3 years of grueling trench warfare, the European armies, both Allied and German, were exhausted physically and mentally. American soldiers, fresh and full of morale, provided crucial reinforcement to the weary French and British forces. In August 1918, the Allies launched a massive counteroffensive, steadily pushing German forces out of France. Facing defeat on nearly every front, Germany agreed to an armistice, which was signed on November 11, 1918, at 11 a.m., the famous 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. Although the fighting stopped in November, the formal end of World War I came with the signing of the Treaty of Versailles on June 28, 1919, in France. The war had lasted 4 years and 4 months, leaving devastating consequences in its wake. It had deeply affected the scientific, geographic, political, economic, social, and cultural landscapes of all participating countries. Approximately 17 million people lost their lives, around 10 million soldiers and 7 million civilians, with another 20 million wounded. Germany and France suffered some of the heaviest losses. Economically, the war left widespread destruction of infrastructure and a massive loss of labor. Financially, countries involved in the war had spent tens of billions of dollars, much of it borrowed through domestic and foreign loans. The scars of World War I would leave a profound impact on the world for decades to come. After World War I ended, the countries involved faced the immense task of reconstruction. Along with the need to rebuild came heavy spending demands, particularly to restore infrastructure that had been devastated by the war. Economically, recovery was slow, hindered by a shortage of labor. To address these challenges, many countries resorted to printing large amounts of money, leading to soaring inflation rates. In Germany, hyperinflation peaked in 1923, when the German mark lost almost all its value. 4 trillion marks were needed to equal just $1. As Europe grappled with economic collapse and monetary instability, the United States, having lent billions of dollars to war-torn nations, emerged as a new economic superpower. Financial dominance shifted from London to New York City, firmly establishing America at the center of global finance. World War I also brought profound geopolitical changes across Europe. Monarchies crumbled one after another, ending centuries of dynastic rule. Major European empires, including the German Empire, Austro-Hungarian Empire, Russian Empire, and Ottoman Empire, collapsed, leading to the creation of many smaller nations. Austria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and parts of former Yugoslavia emerged from the remnants of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Finland and several Baltic states gained independence from the former Russian Empire, while Turkey and various Middle Eastern nations rose from the ruins of the Ottoman Empire. In Germany, the abdication of Kaiser Wilhelm II marked the fall of the monarchy, giving way to the establishment of the Weimar Republic. Meanwhile, Alsace-Lorraine, a territory Germany had seized from France in 1871, was returned to France. As the defeated power, Germany was forced to pay enormous reparations, amounting to billions of dollars, to the victorious Allies. The Treaty of Versailles imposed strict military restrictions, limiting Germany's army to just 100,000 troops and banning the production of heavy weaponry such as tanks, warplanes, and battleships. These measures aimed to prevent Germany from launching future territorial expansions that might lead to another war. At the same time, a new international organization, the League of Nations, was established with the mission to maintain global peace. However, the League proved ineffective. The Treaty of Versailles was widely seen as unjust by the German public, and within a few years, Germany began to secretly rearm, ignoring the treaty's terms. Moreover, the League of Nations lacked real power, as key world powers, most notably the United States, did not join. Less than 20 years after the end of World War I, a new conflict erupted. World War II began in 1939, bringing even greater devastation. After the collapse of the Austro-Hungarian Empire at the end of World War I, several new countries emerged, including Czechoslovakia. Between 1918 and 1938, about 3 million ethnic Germans lived in Czechoslovakia, mostly concentrated in the Sudetenland region. In September 1938, encouraged by Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party, ethnic Germans in the Sudetenland demanded to secede from Czechoslovakia and join Germany. When the Czechoslovak government refused, Hitler threatened war under the pretext of protecting the German population there. At the time, Britain and France, still recovering from World War I, were desperate to avoid another conflict and sought to resolve the crisis diplomatically. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain travelled to Germany to meet directly with Hitler and discuss the Sudetenland issue without consulting Czechoslovakia. During negotiations, Chamberlain agreed that areas where Germans made up over 50% of the population would be transferred to Germany. He persuaded France to accept this solution as well. After reaching an agreement with Hitler, Britain and France presented it to the Czechoslovak government, urging it to comply. In exchange, Britain and France promised to guarantee Czechoslovakia's remaining borders. Reluctantly, Czechoslovakia agreed. However, when Chamberlain met Hitler again to finalize the agreement, Hitler demanded the entire Sudetenland, not just the parts with a German majority. Chamberlain refused, and Hitler issued an ultimatum: Czechoslovakia must cede the Sudetenland by the 28th of September, 1938, or face war. In response, Czechoslovakia mobilized its army, preparing to resist a German invasion. The Soviet Union, Czechoslovakia's ally at the time, also prepared its forces to assist. Meanwhile, Britain and France continued seeking a diplomatic solution, unwilling to go to war over Czechoslovakia. British leaders believed that Hitler's demands were limited to protecting ethnic Germans and that war could be avoided through negotiation. On the 30th of September, 1938, Germany, Britain, France, and Italy signed the Munich Agreement, without Czechoslovakia's participation, allowing Germany to annex the entire Sudetenland. In return, Hitler promised to make no further territorial demands. Britain and France informed Czechoslovakia of the agreement and made it clear that if Czechoslovakia resisted, it would face Germany alone, without their support. Recognizing that resistance was futile, Czechoslovakia reluctantly agreed, and German forces occupied the Sudetenland on the 10th of October, 1938. In Britain, Chamberlain was initially hailed as a hero for securing peace for our time and averting war. However, in Germany, Hitler saw the Munich Agreement as proof that Britain and France were weak and fearful, encouraging him to pursue even more aggressive policies in the future. Thank you for watching. Good luck.